Hello, I'm Jan Szrewiński. Welcome on board the Eastern Express. And as always, I hope you enjoy the journey. This time around, Russia discovers that while spiders in your bedroom are creepy, drones weaving webs in your bomber bases are absolutely terrifying. Kiev's innovative drone strike, dubbed Operation Spiderweb, didn't just leave Russian planes grounded, it grounded Russia's military ego as well. This might just rewrite the playbook on air warfare, proving once again that size isn't everything. At the same time, it also proves that the farther east you go, the worse Russia's military intelligence seems to get. So now, without further ado, let's take a look at that latest report to find out more.
Just a few days ago, Ukraine carried out its most ambitious drone strikes against Russia. More than 100 Ukrainian drones struck air bases located deep within Russian territory, even as far as Murmansk beyond the Arctic Circle. The operation was dubbed Spider's Web. Its targets were Russian nuclear-capable bombers and some airbase infrastructure. Out of 41 targets, 13 were reportedly destroyed. What's more, some of these strikes were carried out from right under Russian noses.
The so-called office for our operation in Russia was located right next to the Russian FSB headquarters in one of their regions.
The war in Ukraine has already changed the way in which modern strategists view drone warfare and tactics. But has Operation Spider's Web also changed the perception of how such special operations can be carried out? In the past, such missions would require an enormously high level of subterfuge among the Russian population itself. While the drones themselves had been smuggled into the Russian Federation, there was no need to use actual human beings to destroy targets at the air bases. The drones and their operators, who Zelensky says have been evacuated, were enough.
And now we're zoning in on the east-splaining portion of our show. Ukraine's Spiderweb operation has been a resounding success that has shocked both allies and Russia alike. It is not the first time, however, that Kiev has been able to carry out such a special operation in enemy territory.
Even though Russia called its illegal invasion of Ukraine a special military operation, the Ukrainians have made the Russians eat their words, and with some extras. The first time Kiev drew attention to its more clandestine operations was when an explosion occurred on the Kerch Bridge that links Crimea with the rest of Russia. In October 2022, as it turns out, a truck carrying explosives was used by the Ukrainians to blow a hole in the bridge, showing the Russians that not even the territory they claimed is theirs is safe. Another twist came in 2024 when the Ukrainian armed forces launched their surprise incursion into Russia's Kursk region. This is widely seen as a pivotal moment of the war, as it was the first time that the Russian Federation proper was affected by the war of its own making to such an extent. Although the Ukrainians haven't been able to fully hold on to what they captured in August last year, they once again proved their ingenuity on the battlefield and how they were one step ahead of Russian intelligence in matters of clandestine operations.
And now, as always, it's time to explore the issue in greater detail. On the 1st of June, deep inside Russian territory, airfields usually buzzing with the activity of strategic bombers suddenly experienced an unexpected renovation, courtesy of 117 Ukrainian drones. Smuggled piece by piece into Russia over 18 painstaking months, these drones targeted Russia's prized Tu-95s, Tu-160s and Tu-22s. The bombers Moscow usually keeps thousands of miles from the front line, far from harm's way, or so they thought. Ukraine claims more than 40 aircraft were destroyed or significantly damaged, including a vital A-50 airborne-early-warning jet. Even if satellite images prove Kiev's math overly optimistic, the damage is undeniable, both physically and psychologically. When you lose a third of your long-range strike capability overnight, even the most devoted Kremlin spin doctor has trouble painting that as routine maintenance. The attack's genius is clear. It exposes how outdated the notion of safe rear areas has actually become. Traditional warfare teaches that conflicts are fought at the front line, while rear areas remain safe havens most of the time. Ukraine just shredded that script into pieces. The Kremlin, relying heavily on bombers and Iranian Shahed drones for its relentless attacks on Ukrainian cities, believed it could terrorize civilians into submission. Kiev's response? Why intercept every missile if you can simply blow up the launch pad instead? Historically, this isn't exactly novel. In World War II, British SAS raids famously wiped out hundreds of Axis aircraft in North Africa, dramatically changing the battlefield as a result. In Vietnam, North Vietnamese infiltrators repeatedly embarrassed the United States by torching jets parked at seemingly secure locations. But Ukraine's operation introduces something significantly new, a 21st century twist that leverages cheap drones and remote piloting, kind of like guerrilla warfare for the digital age. The economic math alone is brutal for Moscow. Ukrainian drones costing about $3,000 each versus Russian bombers costing hundreds of millions each. Protecting those bombers going forward will mean fortifying airbases, deploying electronic warfare systems, and repositioning aircraft, each measure draining resources Russia would much rather pour into invading its neighbor. Beyond economics, the Kremlin faces a strategic nightmare. Losing several nuclear-capable bombers doesn't just sting militarily. It also undermines Russia's credibility as a nuclear threat. The whole "look at my scary nuclear arsenal" bit loses some punch when those arsenals are smoldering heaps of aluminum on your own runways. But perhaps the most chilling effect for Moscow is psychological. After 3 years of brutal warfare designed explicitly to break Ukrainian morale, Kiev just demonstrated it can and will strike deep into Russia's heartland. This sends a powerful message to ordinary Russians, their military leaders, and the international community. Nowhere in Russia is truly safe from Ukraine's reach. And now, here to shed more light on the issue is Krzysztof Jaworski, Institute for Security and International Development. Hello and welcome to Eastern Express.
Hello, thank you for having me.
So would you agree on that particular day, military history was actually rewritten?
I would totally agree. It was the most spectacular and most significant covert operation from the end of the Second World War. And even if we won't change the course of war itself, it is something really important because it let us a glimpse into the future of the warfare and the ongoing process of democratization of warfare.
Apparently, even President Trump was privately impressed. According to Axios, he called the move, and I quote, "badass."
I agree with Trump on this matter. It was indeed really bold and really spectacular when it comes to coordination, when it comes to depth of planning, when it comes to well, boldness of this attack, because it's something new, because from the end of the Cold War there were some important treaties considering strategic forces. That's why these nuclear airplanes were on the open field, to let them to be seen by satellites by both sides, and it made these nuclear airplanes vulnerable for this kind of attack.
That's actually a crucial question there, because some claim that these planes were out in the open and therefore President Zelensky exploited this, that he shouldn't have done that, this was escalatory. However, there were also comments suggesting that the construction of hangars or other shelters was not prohibited. It was simply a question of displaying aircraft that was decommissioned, and that was actually supposed to stay out in the open. And also another suggestion that at the time of the attack, Russia had already withdrawn from relevant treaties.
That's right. Russia withdrawn, for example, from open skies treaties, but well, I pointed it only to make this a broader picture. I personally think that this attack was totally justified. It was exclusively on military targets, and as some analysts points, some of these airplanes were already armed with missiles, so they were probably soon to attack Ukraine. So when it comes
within hours, right?
Yes, maybe in hours. So when it comes to justification, it was totally justified. When it comes to further strategic implications, maybe it will make this after Cold War order collapse further, but well, from the point of view of Ukraine, it's not the problem because they are already in full-scale war. So, well, that's not the matter for them. And from our perspective in Poland, it's something useful as well because it's hurting the Russian strategic potential and Russia's ability to further project its power across Europe with this threat of strategic forces.
Now, you've mentioned the democratization of warfare. How does it change the calculus, not just for the conflict in Ukraine, not just for the Russians, but pretty much for everyone?
That's right. It's possibly the change for everyone, but Ukraine is now like a laboratory, like experimentation field for this future of warfare, for this democratization. And what is one of the most important things is that the point of entry, the cost of having important capabilities, offensive capabilities, but they could be used defensively, of course, is much easier. It's not only for few superpowers with huge economies, with advanced technologies, with decades of technological know-how, with billions of dollars on the table. It's easy for even medium or small country to create its own capabilities of precision strikes deep into the territory of potential aggressor. It makes this, well, it's leveraging the field of war.
It's asymmetrical warfare. Now, what do you think could come next in terms of possible further targets inside Russia? Do you think that the Russians are actually going to update their calculus, so to say, and to ensure better protection? Or are there still opportunities for Ukraine to exploit the vulnerability of certain targets and installations all across the Russian Federation?
Ukraine is exploiting this critical infrastructure, this air bases deep inside Russian territory for several for time already, and Ukrainians are usually pointing that their focus is to hit energy infrastructure because Russian budget is based on ability to export oil and gas. They are attacking military infrastructure, so it's not something well, unique when we look at the course of war. This strike was significant because it was something new that they hit strategic bombers, coordinated attack at 4 bases at once.
And at an impressive range, right? I think this is something that has literally made people become glued to the screens, looking at social media, checking for updates. 4,000 kilometers, that was the distance between one of those facilities and Ukraine. Not a single type of drone or missile that Ukraine has can achieve even a fraction of that range. And yet they have managed to coordinate and execute this attack.
That's right, and what is really important there is not that these drones didn't start from the territory of Ukraine. They were smuggled into Russian territory. Ukrainians used civilian infrastructure like LTE systems, like even Russian companies which were hired to transport these drones. They didn't know that they have this type of package in their trucks. They were ordered to go to the specific place, and then Ukrainian operators, probably from the territory of Ukraine, remotely started the operation. So it changes the calculus of Russians significantly, because now they they have to not only monitor what is going from the territory of Ukraine. If they want to make their bases safe, they need to monitor almost everything in their country, and it's a really significant challenge for them.
Do you think this also forms an opportunity perhaps for Ukraine to engage with resistance groups operating perhaps deep inside Russia, people who are no longer content with what Putin is doing to their country and are prepared to act?
This is an interesting point to explore. As for now, we've heard several Russian opposition figures saying that these resistance groups are already operating in Russia, but we do not have reliable information about it. But putting this aside, I think that what is another important innovation in this attack is the fact that these drones used AI targeting systems. So even if some of these drones were jumped and disconnected from operators, they were able to continue the mission because they were trained to automatically target specific types of targets.
The machine learning process
Yes.
apparently was done at a museum where
That's
Ukraine
right.
actually has the airframes for all the relevant types of aircraft. Now, another question, do you think that, for example, tank factories could be next? Obviously, these are not quite as vulnerable. Nevertheless, if one imagines, for example, the factory in Nizhny Tagil, that is again in Siberia, the Uralvagonzavod factory, the main manufacturing site for Russian tanks. If there was a strike against that, potentially Russia's war effort could be crippled even further. Do you think that it's possible that something like that could happen at some point?
I think it's totally possible. I would not like to point a specific kind of assets of infrastructure inside Russia, but I think that based on their assessments, Ukrainian services, Ukrainian military will continue to hit where Russia do not expect or where Russia has some vulnerabilities. In this kind of asymmetrical attacks, the one who attacks has easier mission to accomplish because they need to find just one vulnerable place and the other side needs to protect everything. That's why this kind of asymmetrical warfare is so effective for the smaller part. And when we analyze this importance of this drone attack, we need to constantly have in mind this concept of cost-effect factor, because these drones are far cheaper than the targets they destroyed.
And they are replaceable, right? That's another thing. The aircraft is not. Russia doesn't even have the tooling to manufacture these anymore.
That's right. Ukraine is going to build and to buy more than 4 million drones this year. And when it comes to big and complex and also costly military equipment, military platforms like nuclear bombers, this is totally unaffordable to replace it in the short term.
Wouldn't you say that perhaps this is all about trying to strike assets which are irreplaceable? For example, machinery or facilities which use Western technology, which is no longer available to Russia because of sanctions. And if this is lost, well, it's gone. They will have a real hard time bringing it back online.
That's right. That's important part of this strategy of Ukraine, to attack military critical infrastructure, to attack these assets which are only a few on the Russian side and are hard to replace, to attack energy infrastructure. As I said, it's easier for Ukraine to hit in this one point, which is at the moment not guarded by Russia services, by Russia state. And for Russia it's much harder because they have huge territory and a lot of vulnerable points.
Let's talk about the risks, though, because Russia said it would respond. There were even theories by some commentators that they could use tactical nuclear weapons. These theories tend to pop up every now and then during the war. What do you think are they going to do? Because obviously, well, Ukraine is not invulnerable. It also has plenty of areas which could be struck by Russia with potentially devastating effects.
Yes, in this matter we have asymmetry as well, because for Ukraine they have only one goal: to keep their sovereignty, to keep their nation alive, to keep their state alive. And for Russia, it's not only Ukraine. Russians has interest in other parts of the world, and now I suppose that there is calculation among Russian strategists whether to continue this war won't hurt their other interests in other parts of the world. Because if they continue to lose significant strategic assets, it will be much harder for them to project their power in other parts of the world. So
it already happened with Bashar al-Assad, for example.
Yes, that's right. And it's only part of their interest in the broader and other parts of the world. So yes, I think Russia will respond, because if they will not respond, they will, well, lose face, they will show that they are weak. However, I think that at the same time they are making this calculation whether to continue this war on this way, because it's being only more and more costly for them.
And for Ukraine, of course, it's all about inflicting as much of a cost on Russia as possible for them to perhaps return to these calculations more and more often. At some point, maybe, the result will be different than it has been so far. Krzysztof Jaworski was our guest today here on TVP World. Thank you very much for joining us and for sharing your expertise.
Thank you very much.
And now we're moving on to Eastern News Flash, a series of all the other stories from the East that you absolutely don't want to miss. The Ukrainian Foreign Intelligence Service says Russia plans to produce over 2 million drones in 2025. This massive drone manufacturing effort is part of Russia's plan to ramp up its drone warfare program.
According to Ukrainian intelligence, Russia intends to manufacture 2 million first-person view drones and 30,000 long-range and decoy drones. This marks a very hefty escalation in the war, as both Ukraine and Russia have become increasingly reliant on unmanned systems for reconnaissance purposes and frontline attacks. What's more, Russia's drone production has apparently become very heavily reliant on Chinese components. Despite Beijing officially denying such claims, Chinese manufacturers continue to supply Moscow with crucial electronic components and technology. According to Ukrainian officials, some 80% of the electronics in Russian drones were reportedly sourced from China. These include navigation and optical systems, engines, and processor modules. Although Ukraine had the upper hand in drone production and technology in the early stages of the war, Russia has now overtaken Kiev when it comes to long-range drone production.
Sanctioned lumber from Russia and Belarus continues to reach Western markets. Belarusian timber is apparently being rerouted through countries like Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan.
Belarusian timber was sanctioned by the European Union in March 2022 over Minsk's support for the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Exports from Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan to the EU have surged dramatically, however, 74 times more in the case of the former and 18,000 times more in the case of the latter in 2022 compared to 2021. Given that these countries aren't really covered in lush forests, it begged the question of where the wood came from. According to documents obtained by journalists, shipping reports have been forged and Belarusian companies were involved in the entire export process, even though the goods in question are transported out of the country. The continued flow of Belarusian lumber into the EU through these new routes has raised serious questions about the effectiveness of sanctions and the need for better enforcement mechanisms.
And for this episode of Eastern Express, it's the end of the line. Please stay with us here on TVP World for more latest news and updates. I'm Jonasz Rewiński. Bye for now.